Okay, so the next topic I want to talk about is API key. So over here, if you remember earlier, there are a bunch of like API key and there's also like a Clay managed ICP account. So what exactly is API key? So as you already know, there's a tool called ICP, and that tool basically give us the email address as long as you give it the person's full name and the company's domain, right? And that will give you the basically the person's email. Now, let me log into ICP so you can see. Um, Profile. Yeah, so every single tool, we basically purchased the tool. We, got some credit. We bought it. We pay like a monthly fee, whatever it might be. And they give us an API. So instead of using the tool directly, we can basically use that in Clay, right? So if you click here, you see that we have about like 73,957 credit. Check this out. If you use this, so let's say we're not subscribed to a tool, right? Let's say there are like a lot of tools that we don't purchase because we're not using. You could use one Clay credit to run it, and it will take a Clay credit. So if I save this real quick, notice right here, 957, right? If I run it, guess what? It's going to take one Clay credit. 956, right? So it takes one Clay credit. However, if I change this to the API key that I created from the tool, save and don't run, and if I run it again, then you can guess it, right? It's not going to take the credit, 956, right? So the only difference here is that if we subscribe to your tool, it's gonna take a credit from the tool instead of Clay. So instead of using a Clay credit, we're using the tool's credit, right? So why do we want to do that? Because Clay credits are very expensive. So we don't want to use Clay credit, right? So let's say we run a table of like 10,000 rows. It's going to take about 10,000 credits in Clay. And Clays are very, very expensive. However, if you use another tool called ICP, you see that 1,000 credit is probably like doesn't cost a lot, right? So that is why we always use credit, right? Sorry, we always use the API, not credit. We always use the API key and never use the credit. Sometimes you probably cannot get away from using the API key. For example, earlier we enriched the LinkedIn profile of a person. There's no option that you can plug in like an API, or there's like no tool that you can use, right? So it has to use a Clay credit. In those cases, please let us know, because we don't want to like run a table of like 10,000, 20,000 columns and it take like a bunch of credits, right? So always use an API key, and if there's no option, then use another tool, because chances are there's probably going to be a lot of tools out there that you can use. But remember that always use the API key, not the Clay credit.